Hey everybody, Eric from Hit Subscribe here. It's been a little while since did a Facebook Live, but I am back here in sunny Spearfish, South Dakota with a nice view. So the same place I was in last time a few weeks ago. We are here for another day, like we're actually going to be heading out of state. So I guess enjoy this view while you can. I will do the same. But today's topic is how do we come up with so many blog post ideas for Hit Subscribe? And also, if you're creating content, blog content or whatever, like how would you come up with ideas for that content en masse? Because I think for a lot of people, you decide you're going to start a blog and then maybe it's kind of difficult. What should I talk about? And a lot of people ask questions when they're considering starting a blog or creating content like, well, everything's already been talked about. What would I talk about? Or what am I an expert in? So let's kind of work through that today. First of all, with Hit Subscribe, I don't know how many, but I would ballpark that we're coming up with maybe 30 to 50 blog topics in an average month. And sometimes a lot more than that, like spikes of maybe up to 100, because I can think of planning 50 posts in a month alone for a client. So that's a lot of topics to come up with. How do you do all that? Well, let me say, first of all, that it helps that we're planning topics for a bunch of different clients, so that in and of itself, it's not like planning 30 to 50 topics for your blog each month, but it's still a lot. And the way that we are able to do that is, I guess it's almost like cheating, but bear with me. Most of what we do is plan for something called organic search, which means you write a blog post with the idea that people are going to type something into Google and you're going to appear in the results and then they're going to read the post. That's how we get people to our client sites usually, how they get attention, and that's kind of the commercial interest there. So the question becomes, not so much how do we plan a lot of topics, but how do you plan topics that are going to attract people who are asking questions of the search engine? And I've said this before on Facebook Lives and other venues, but anytime you type something into the search engine, you're asking a question, even if you don't type out the question. So picking topics for Hit Subscribe's clients becomes mostly a matter of figuring out what questions people are asking when they're in a search engine, and then picking the questions that people ask that are sort of relevant to your client. So for instance, Hit Subscribe is a digital content marketing company. And if we were going to pick out topics for Hit Subscribe for the blog, we would look at things related to digital content. So it might be on the nose things like if people are typing, how do I find software engineers that write blog posts? That would be the perfect topic. So you would look for questions that people ask like that, and they might not type all that out. They might type in something like software engineers that write, or writer software engineers. So you find topics like that, and then through certain keyword research practices, that's a topic for another day, you would confirm that there's actually any what's called search volume, like are people actually searching for this? So you've got to kind of narrow it down by looking at the whole world of questions people might ask that are relevant, and then you find the ones that people are actually asking. So that in a nutshell is how we do most of our blog topic planning. And there's a lot of shop talk that could go into that, but it's really just about what questions do people have that are relevant to us, and let's answer those questions. So like content marketing is at its core helpful. It's not so much that you're looking for topics that are people Googling, like how do I buy from you? It's mostly educational. So going back to Hit Subscribe, yeah, we would want to rank for something that's related to what we sell, but we might also write a blog post about here are some tips for how to format software or format code in a blog post. So that's purely educational, but the kind of people that are Googling that might also be interested in our services. So that is kind of the commercial angle, the idea of organic search topics. Now, if you're going to do this for your own blog, you would have to ask yourself a couple of questions. Number one, is this a commercial blog that I'm doing, or is it just my hobby blog? And number two, am I primarily concerned with attracting people through search engines, or will there be some other vehicle that I'm going to promote and attract an audience through? And for instance, instead of attracting search engine traffic, you might want to build a following, like basically you're writing an editorial column and people tune in every week to read. Or maybe you're writing things with the idea of them going viral on social share, so you're chasing virality. Those are other ways that people get eyeballs on their blogs. And so coming up with topics is really going to depend on that channel. So if it's, you want search engine traffic, which is kind of blue chip traffic, like if you write a blog post and it gets search engine traffic, you're going to get that traffic every day, versus like a viral blog post or a column, you get, a spike of traffic once and then no more. So organic, you're just going to do the same kind of thing basically that I was talking about, which is it's not so much you coming up with topics, it's you figuring out what questions people have that you're in a position to answer and then answering those questions. So in a way, there's sort of an endless set of topics that you could go after because people are endlessly curious. If, on the other hand, you're going for virality, the way that you would come up with topics there is you're going to want to come up with a premise that is sort of controversial in some way, but that binds your ideal audience to you. And maybe you don't care if you make a slight enemy of people that wouldn't be your audience. So for instance, with Hit Subscribe, companies outsource to us the creation of blog content. So we might write a controversial post where the premise was, you should never write, you should never have people who work for you write blog posts. That's a controversial statement. I frankly don't even agree with it, but you draw a line in the sand and you would get on one side of it and try to bring in people who would be buyers that would agree with you. And then you're not so worried about your detractors because they weren't going to buy from you anyway. Coming up with topics like that is, a little nuanced, but you could look at like what are points of contention around your subject matter? What are things that people tend to get into so-called religious wars over, and then you pick a side. Mining discussion forums or places that people argue. I mean, like Facebook's a great one. People are arguing on there all the time. So look for arguments around things that are related to your subject matter. Pick a side there. These are all good ways to go viral. If you want to go viral, it's always like a huge crapshoot. You'll write 10 posts and maybe one of them will go viral if you're lucky. But virality, if you're going to do that, write a blog post with a title that people will resonate with and potentially share without even reading. That's like the best way to go viral over social share. Something that will resonate, they'll agree with. Usually they won't read, they'll just pass it on and share. So that's how to go viral, and you can almost work back from there. Like, what's a premise that I could see people sharing? And then I'm going to write that post and try to make it go viral. If we're getting more into hobby blogging, that's an interesting topic because they're really you're kind of writing for yourself. Like you probably want to build a following, but it's really a question of, what do you feel like writing? What could you kind of keep at and keep doing? And so there you're out mining for topics that are kind of like maybe thought leadership in your space or just whatever you feel like and whatever you want your opinions to be. And those can run dry. Like you see a lot of people will start a blog and like, I've got all these things to say. I'm going to start my political blog and finally once and for all, everybody will know how I feel about stuff. And then you most likely overestimate how much everybody cares about your political beliefs. You post a few things. They don't even start the arguments that you think and you run out of steam. So it can be tough to keep that going. I mean, whether it's politics or whatever you're passionate about. Coming up with ideas for things like that, there's a lot of approaches, but one of them would be to go back to forums and find things that like you passionately disagree with. Like nothing will start you writing, like seeing someone popping off with an opinion that you really don't agree with. Instead of fighting with that person unproductively on social media where you're never going to change any minds, bottle all that energy up and write a blog post about it and then publish it, and then don't argue with people in the comments. It's just not worth doing. But, use that fuel to put out content. That's a good way to do it. Another like much less, I guess, antagonistic technique is when you're feeling particularly creative, free form kind of brainstorming association, generate a lot of ideas at once, good, bad, ugly, whatever, write them all down. And then you've got this kind of list that you can go back to and draw on. In my experience, and from what I understand of a lot of people, it's much harder to kind of say, okay, it's Friday afternoon when I've set aside to write, what do I write about? You wanted to couple the idea generation piece from the actual sitting down and writing as much as you can. Another thing to do would be come up with series ideas. What's something episodic where you're continuing a series, you're not necessarily picking a distinct topic every time, you're just opining more and more on the same topic. As a quick aside, don't do that if you want organic search. That's a terrible strategy. That's mainly for if you're like looking to build an audience that tunes in week after week. I would also not, and I've learned this the hard way, don't call that series like, my take on whatever part 64, because nobody's going to tune in if they see it's part 64. It's way too much work to read parts 1 through 63. So come up with a new thing to call it each week, even if it is sequential and episodic. That'll keep it fresh. Let's see. I guess generally speaking, you don't even have to be chasing organic search to figure out like what kind of questions people have and what help people need. You can go onto discussion forums if you're looking to build kind of a helpful blog and look for questions that people are asking that aren't answered or aren't answered very well or thoroughly, and answer those questions. If you start to build an audience and a following, poll them. If you have something like a mailing list, there's no better way to find out what your readers want to read than literally asking them. On my blog that I've had for 10 years, I do that all the time. Like, hey, weigh in the comments. Is this interesting? If you hear crickets, maybe it's not. If a lot of people write in, send you messages like, yeah, tell me more, you're onto something. Or you could make it even more open-ended than that and just ask your audience like, hey, what would you like to hear me write about? In the content I create, like my YouTube channel for Dead Tech and the Dead Tech blog, one of the things I do is I have a form that readers fill out and they send me questions. So for me personally, it's been quite some time since I really did much topic selection. There's enough of a backlog of people writing in with topics that I just mostly answer questions and offer my opinions. So I think that probably about covers it. I guess to recap, since I covered a lot of ground there and was kind of going off the top, how you're going to pick and generate topics depends, number one, on whether you're doing something commercial or not. If it's commercial, you want to kind of work your way from, almost reverse engineer from like, here's a purchase. What might people be interested in, or what might they be asking when they're in a position to want to buy this product? So that's a more deliberate, planned out, calculated thing. If you're doing a hobby blog, then ask yourself, do you want people to come in through search engines? Do you want, angry people to come in through Reddit or whatever? Do you want to build a following? And then you're going to have some strategy based on how you want to acquire readers for picking topics. Courting controversy, go out to the forums, find controversies, weigh in, save all that energy that you typically throw into angry comments on Facebook posts or whatever. Take that and put it into content that you create. Much better use of your time. If you're not being controversial, you're being helpful. Visit discussion forums and look for people in need of help. Poll people, ask questions. And I guess I'd cap it all by reiterating the point that I kind of made in the middle, which is don't rely on yourself to come up with topics at the same time that you have decided you're going to write. There is no better way to run out of steam than to go in having no idea what you want to write about and no good ideas for it, but to say like, okay, not only do I need to come up with an idea, I also then need to write, a 1,500 word blog post about it. So make idea generation its own activity, come up with a laundry list of things, and then once you've got that, start going through, which gives you the ability on that given Friday at whatever time to just kind of write about whichever one of those topics strikes your fancy at the moment. So yeah, that's blog topic generation 101. I do feel pretty comfortable weighing in on that, since I would estimate I've written something like 1,500 or 2,000 blog posts in my life, and come up with the topic plan for far more than that. So yeah, hopefully that helps some of you if you are either starting a blog or even, doing another form of content like video creation, or I don't know, maybe you're just posting a lot to social media and coming up with topics. Whatever it is, all of that kind of applies. So yeah, use in good health. I will be back next week, I think, most likely, but in a different location. We are heading west, and we're going to spend a month in Idaho. So hopefully I have a similarly lovely view. I guess we'll see. And I will catch you all next time.